Today on WGVU's Decision 2018 Candidate Forum, we profile U.S. House of Representatives candidates as they lead up to the November general election. Hear directly from the candidates as we ask them about key issues. This is an opportunity for you, the voter, to make an informed decision. Welcome to Decision 2018, the U.S. House of Representatives Candidate Forum. Today, we turn our attention to the U.S. House of Representatives race in Michigan's 2nd Congressional District. Today's forum with our first guest was recorded Wednesday, August 22nd from the studios of the Meyer Public Broadcast Center right here at Grand Valley State University. Now, let us begin by introducing Democratic candidate Dr. Rob Davidson from Spring Lake. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Patrick. Appreciate your time.
First dipping into the pool of politics?
Yeah, well, I'm a school board member in Spring Lake, and that was about a 2-week campaign with 25 yard signs, and I think it cost me $200, so yes. Anything like this, absolutely.
So you're in?
Yeah, I'm in.
All right. We'll start out with some environmental concerns. Your district so far, it seems, has been spared of what we're seeing with PFAS and the crises that we're seeing in Belmont, Rockford, Parchment, Cooper's Township. It's out there. It is an issue that's been growing. As a member of Congress, what would your policy be when it comes to government response, EPA response, and action?
Well, certainly I think the government owes it to the people of all of those areas, whether it's in my district or neighboring districts. Again, knowing that groundwater is what it is, I'm sure our district has been impacted. We just haven't found it yet. I think the government owes it to those individuals to lead the charge on the cleanup, to work with state agencies and federal agencies to be a part of that cleanup. But more importantly, I think we need to be proactive when it comes to protections for consumers. This is a direct result of allowing corporations to police themselves and allow them to go wild with how they deal with their potentially toxic waste. And this is where a strong response or a strong role of the government when it comes to those protections is absolutely mandatory. So I absolutely support the DEQ's role in this, but also the role of the Environmental Protection Agency. We cannot allow the polluters to police themselves, or we get 50 years down the road problems that we're seeing now. We don't know what looms out there over the next several decades, but we have to be a part of that proactively to prevent any problems like this down the line.
Immigration has been debated. There's debate over DACA. There's debate over the path to citizenship. There's debate and the debate over financing for building a wall and how to finance that wall. So there are a lot of moving pieces here. You can get into visas as well, work visas. What should, in your mind, the policy be when it comes to immigration in this country?
Right. I mean, you touched on quite a few different things there, and I think one of the issues that's come up over this past several years is the issue of DACA, because of the actions of President Trump and putting that front and center. So first and foremost, that group of individuals who still do not have a status, they just have a court order saying that they are allowed to be here legally. They have no specific status under the immigration system. I think we need to provide a legal status for those individuals. I think we need legislation to do that. I would support the DREAM Act. It's clean legislation without any attachments to building so-called walls. And so I think for that group of people, that's what we need. We need a path to citizenship and immediate legal status for those individuals. And people, I think, know who they are, but the DACA recipients are basically people who have been here for a certain number of years, completely clean criminal records. 95%, I think, of them are fully employed, are in school full time, and these are folks who arrived here before they knew where home was. This is the only home they know. As far as the overall immigration issue, what we know is over the last 20 years, 60% of economic growth has come through immigrant labor. However you define that immigrant labor, it has come through some form of immigrant labor. Our economy is absolutely dependent upon that. And so we absolutely need to find a path to legal status for those folks who, again, who have been here. They need to satisfy criteria. They've been here, they've been working, they've been paying taxes, they've been free of any legal entanglements other than the fact that they may or may not have come here with either overstayed a visa or come here without documentation. If that is their only transgression, they should be put into a path of legal status so that they can come out of the shadows and continue to contribute to that economic growth that we depend on, especially in my district.
So quickly, because we don't have a lot of time here.
Yeah.
So securing the border, wall, how to pay for it, is there a different vision of how to secure that border?
I think the wall is foolhardy. I think it sounds good, it looks good, it's a great slogan, but the problem is, I think the number I heard recently, over 2/3 of people who are here without documentation simply overstayed visas. A wall will not impact that. We saw in San Diego in the past decade the tunnels going underground. You know, a wall will not impact that. So a physical barrier of a wall to me is a huge expense. Nobody's going to pay for it except taxpayers, and it doesn't provide the kind of security that I think is needed.
All right, we have about 3 minutes here, so we'll make these quick. Health care, do you support the Affordable Care Act, or should the marketplace dictate health care in this country?
I think that the marketplace has done a terrible job of dictating health care. I support improved and expanded Medicare for all, a truly universal health care system. As an emergency physician, I see people coming in all the time who can't afford copays and deductibles, who can't afford their care. I support continuing to cover pre-existing conditions. Our government currently is embroiled in a legal fight, and our president is not supporting consumers in that way or patients, and our congressman, frankly, Huizenga, has not made a statement to that effect that he supports pre-existing condition coverage.
So government does have a role in health care?
Absolutely. Health care is a place where if the government steps out of the way, we get what we have now is a for-profit system where shareholders and CEOs are making millions and consumers are being left out in the cold.
All right. Free trade. Politicians love to say, I'm a job creator, so I'll start there. How would you create jobs? But also, we're in this era of tariffs. And so I guess the question then again would be about free trade and tariffs.
I don't think politicians are job creators. I think we need to create a situation where there's opportunity for businesses to create jobs on their own. To me, healthcare for all is probably the biggest way that I can impact the ability of job creators in my district to create more jobs for entrepreneurs to go off on their own and not have to be dependent on a job that provides health care. And so if we provide health care for everybody, you're going to save business money. The average company with a $50,000 employee spends $12,000 a year on health care. Their employee spends $6,000 a year. With a Medicare for all system, the cost savings is unbelievable. But again, it frees up that bottom line of those businesses so they can invest in their companies, create new jobs, create new products, and again, individuals to start new companies. As far as the tariffs, it has been absolutely destructive for us in my district. I've spoken to Republicans, Democrats, Independents, business owners. I know one man from Spring Lake, where I live, has a company that depends upon exporting to Canada and does bring in some of its raw materials from China. Directly because of tariffs, his $49 item that he sells will now cost $45 to make, and as of December, he's closing his business. And he said it's directly because of tariffs. Others in Holland, a Republican prominent individual who said tariffs are completely destroying his bottom line. And again, our congressman says that he thinks it's not the right way to go, but is not leading the charge for the people of the district to push back against the president. I think Congress needs to take back its rightful role and should not have the executive determining these tariffs without any congressional oversight.
Dr. Rob Davidson.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We continue our candidate forum. This portion was recorded Thursday, August 30th with Republican incumbent U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga from Zeeland. Bill, how are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing well. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. We're going to have the same questions. Right. No surprises here. First question, environmental concerns. A lot of issues with water. PFAS has become a growing concern in our state. How should the federal government respond? What is the EPA's role in all of this?
Yeah, certainly the EPA has a role, as does the state, and that is an issue that the state is really working through. I know we had this come up a while ago with our military sites as well, including Camp Grayling and other places that had that have that direct nexus in with the federal government in Kinchlow and other places, making sure that that first and foremost the footprint that the federal government has left behind directly isn't one that is that's damaging the local environment. Then obviously you have to look at where's that responsibility lie? Who's the primary enforcement agency? Where's the responsibility lie? I think you're going to have a lot of those questions sort of shaking out, especially with the manufacturing of it, and what were those indicators that this was maybe not the right direction to go. So, there's certainly going to be that cooperative role with the EPA and the state. You also have then a greater question, as we have here in Michigan, the affinity for the Great Lakes. We have Great Lakes Restoration Initiative money that we've gone in and fought for to make sure that that it's fully funded. We were successful in that again this past year. It's a bipartisan group. Marcy Kaptur out of Ohio and I have worked very closely on that. It's really about cleanup, and we'll have to look at whether there's some funds within GLRI that might qualify for that PFAS cleanup or some of the other things that are going on. So we're watching this very, very closely.
Immigration.
Yeah.
Boy, the debate goes on in any number of areas, from having a policy, a pathway to citizenship, right? DACA, a wall, border security, who pays for that wall, or using other technologies, work visas.
Yep.
It's all encompassing. I know you're a part of this.
Yeah.
What is the correct course in your mind?
Yeah, and you have an hour-and-a-half show, right?
Well,
just on immigration.
You've got 2 minutes on this. So compartmentalize this in your head.
So, first and foremost, there was 2 bills that we had on the House floor that I voted for both of those. I felt that those were positive steps in the right direction. One of them, I think, had 189 total votes. It was fairly close. A real mix of sort of conservatives and moderates and others. Unfortunately, there wasn't a single Democrat vote that could be had, even if, we know that Nancy Pelosi had gone out and she had spiked it. She had asked her folks to not vote on that. I think that's very unfortunate, because there was a true solution to be held, or to be had. First and foremost, I don't believe that there ought to be a special path forward. That should not be the case. And you have to kind of separate the communities out a little bit. And by that I mean, who are those kids that came here with no choice? They could be kids that came with their parents with paperwork or without the paperwork. We see that here in West Michigan, where we have engineers and doctors and others who came here with their kids who are timing out. Now, the question is are you going to put the quote-unquote dreamer kids ahead of those children? And one of the solutions that we had voted on, which I thought was a pretty elegant solution actually, was to create a new visa that would have covered both of them. We do know we've got to fix the system. At least I certainly realize that. I think most of my colleagues realize that. We see that on the ag department, or the ag side of the economy here in West Michigan. We see it in manufacturing and in housing and a number of other places as well. And the system doesn't work well. We need a system that has border integrity, meaning we know who and what is coming back and forth across the border. We have a number of ways that we can beef that up. Both through technology as well as physical manpower that's down there, but we've got to think differently about this, and unfortunately, that's been the frustration for me. Being there, looking for a solution, is that seems more people are interested in the politics around it rather than the policy.
We have about 4 minutes, so let's get through 2 more here. Okay. Healthcare. You and I in the hallway had a health care little discussion. But the Affordable Care Act, we didn't get into that. But the Affordable Care Act itself, should it be repealed, replaced? Should the market dictate where health care goes in this country? Is there a place or a role for federal government in health care?
Well, certainly there is. We know that. Medicare is part of that. Medicaid is part of that. Now, having served in the state legislature, I know that Medicaid's portion of what gets spent is huge coming from the state. So there is absolutely a role for the federal government. The question is should the federal government run it or not? And the ACA, many would argue, in fact, kind of the Bernie Sanders wing would argue this, and others who opposed it right from the very beginning believe that it was an attempt to try to be half pregnant. And you can't do that, right? And so the Bernie Sanders wing believes it ought to be all government run. A number of us, me, I believe that the government isn't going to be able to successfully run that. We haven't been able to do that with the VA. I believe Medicare, that safety net for seniors and the disabled, needs to stay there. It needs to be solidified for people like, frankly, our parents. Having the government take it over is the wrong direction to go in my mind. The ACA, the quote-unquote Obamacare, brought us higher premiums, higher deductibles, and less choice. I think that's the opposite direction of what most people believe ought to be happening.
You're a supporter of small businesses. You own a small business yourself. Your view on job creation, and then also we're seeing tariffs entering into the equation right now. Right course, wrong course? Where are we with the economy? Well,
first and foremost, the best thing that we have done since President Trump has come into office is the tax cut bill. Absolutely has put much needed capital into the pocket of small business owners as they're looking to either hire new people, expand equipment, expand facilities. I had a barber here in West Michigan who stopped me and said, "Look, you know, I'm looking at opening a third shop. I've given my guys a raise. This is real, and there's no more real place to see it than in on Main Street with those small community businesses that we all know that are there. You know, at the end of the day, we've got to help create the atmosphere, for potential success. We can't guarantee the success, but man, we have had government just getting in the way of that potential success. So we've got to be smart on our regulation. We've got to make sure that people are safe, consumers are safe, but we also need to make sure that entrepreneurs are going to have the opportunity to go succeed.
In the last minute here, tariffs.
Yeah, tariffs are an absolute mixed bag. I just talked to somebody in agriculture. I won't identify who it is, but well known, who said, actually, you know, the tariffs have been kind of okay for us. A lot of other people in agriculture believe that because it's oftentimes the retaliatory side of tariffs that hit agriculture, that it's a problem. We do know from our automotive suppliers, our office furniture people, and folks in manufacturing, that the steel and aluminum tariffs have hurt. They have hurt on the short term. They may hurt in the long term. I'm cautiously optimistic about the conversations happening with Mexico and Canada that we're going to be able to get there. But you know, and what I've said to the administration is we need to look at some sort of off-ramp or some sort of safety valve for these companies that have these longer-term contracts that they have to fulfill. But now suddenly they are getting the brunt of the tariffs and the increase in costs, and they have no negotiating room. They have no way of getting out of these contracts or extending these contracts or changing or altering them. And that needs to be addressed in my mind as well.
Republican U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, thanks.
And as we wrap up our candidate forum, our final segment is being recorded Tuesday, September 4th, with U.S. Taxpayers Party candidate Dr. Ronald Grazer from Fremont. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. Yourself?
Good. Not your first go-round in this race.
No.
Third time.
I think it's more like the 10th time.
The 10th time? It feels like the 10th time?
No, I think it really is. I think I started in 2006 or 2008, and then every 2 years.
Well, you're back. You know the district very well. You know the issues, the challenges. One of them, we were having some issues with underground water contamination in this state, and with PFAS, PFOS, PFOA. You probably know the medical terms better than I. But it is an issue that's impacting communities in this state. As a congressional leader, how should the federal government, the EPA, conduct its investigations or have some type of an involvement when it comes to groundwater contamination?
The federal government, under the Constitution, has no responsibility for that. That's a state issue and should be handled by the state, unless we're getting using river water from another state, and then it's intrastate, and then the federal government would get involved like it did with the Colorado River out in the west where I used to live between Arizona and California.
So the EPA should stand down in these situations, or should it be involved? I mean, I know you're basing it on the Constitution, but you're saying there's no government role, there's no EPA role in any of this.
No, I said there's no federal government role. It's a state problem. It's a local state problem, and is best handled by the states.
All right. Immigration, that's a federal issue. We're looking at a pathway to citizenship, the idea of building a wall, work visas. There's a lot that's taking place here. What, in your mind, is the best immigration policy for our country?
That's I think we should have borders. I don't think just anybody should be able to walk across the border. Otherwise, you really don't have a nation. It's like having a house. If anybody can walk in, it's not really your house. There's a lot of controversy going on right now. There's a so-called DACA, which I think was just a executive order. Now, executive orders are interesting. The first one was given by George Washington to the military. And as commander-in-chief of the military, he had every constitutional right to do that. No president has constitutional right to give an executive order to tell the civilian population or the legislature what to do. It's not made to set up a king who can write his orders and there it is. Executive orders are completely illegal by the Constitution. They have no founding, but yet everybody's doing it. We're no longer a nation of laws. I can give you a personal example. I have a display in my yard of a statue of a hand with a baby. A few years back, somebody came at 3:30 in the morning, shot it up. 6 months later, they came and put a bullet in my car and a bullet in my house. I was up, and it's interesting to hear that on the receiving end. It's like somebody took a hammer and slammed it against the table as the bullet hits the chair. So since it's a felony shooting into an occupied house, and maybe you could even call it attempted murder, I contacted the state police and I started an investigation. And the detective came to me after 2 days and said, "You were targeted. There's no question. This was not a random shooting. I've determined that." 6 months later, he came and said, "Doc, I've been ordered by state police headquarters in Lansing to close this case and destroy the evidence."
Do you support the Affordable Care Act? Do you think it should be repealed, replaced? Is there a role for government? Does the free market have a better way for Americans to receive their health care?
I've seen socialized health care up close in the Army. I was in the military for 20 years in the reserves and went to active duty stations for 2 weeks every year. I'm not going to say it's a disaster, but it's not as good as the private health care. When the government starts making decisions, it becomes politics through and through. Again, the Constitution says nothing about the federal government taking over health care. If the state governments want to do it, the federal Constitution, the federal government has nothing for it or against it. So I would prefer, if they're going to do it through government agencies, they do it at the state level. But it's going to be all politics. And the doctor, well, we have it somewhat with the insurance companies. I order a CAT scan because of a head say, for instance, and I've got good reasons, and they say, "No, we're not going to do it." And maybe if I fight and spend another 2 hours phoning them and whatnot, they might authorize it. I've just wasted 2 hours of my time. And that's a sort of a socialized care only under the private sector. It's somebody, the person who pays the piper calls the tune. That's the sum of it. In the old days, like 1950 and before, there was a lot of charity work done, and it seemed to work pretty well.
So 30 seconds, how would you fix our healthcare system? Where would you start? What would you do?
I honestly don't know, but I try to get the government out as much as possible. I try to have the price, well, matter of fact, I started a clinic and ran it for 1.5 years to see if I could work, but I didn't get enough patients. And when the patient walked in, if they needed a blood test, I said, "Here's what it's going to cost. Try that now." You go into any hospital and they say, "We don't know." You know, even as a doctor, when I go, I don't get a straight answer. The only reason I had straight answers here is because I was working with Quest Diagnostics, and I said what I was doing. They said, "Here's a price sheet." So, for instance, a CBC, which at that time was running $45, if I paid $6, it was paid for. So I charged the patient $6 instead of $45. The cost difference is tremendous, and it's a lot of because of the overhead and because they don't know how they're pricing. Same way with hospitals. I never got a price list on x-rays, on radiology. Nobody will give me a price list. And there is a place in South Bend, Indiana, who does x-rays. For instance, a CAT scan, which everywhere else costs around $1,600, they'll do for $450, and that includes the radiologist reading. So private enterprise is coming up in different places and competing. You're not going to do it overnight, but if you slowly back the government out of it, private enterprise will pick it up.
All right, we have about a minute. Free trade. How would you create jobs, and what's your stance on the current situation with tariffs?
Well, free trade is a federal duty, if you will, or a federal obligation. I think free trade is the best way to go, and so does Trump, by the way. And the only reason he's using these tariffs is to try and force the other countries into going back to free trade.
So it's more or less a tactic for making a deal with countries.
That's what I say, and that's what he said too.
All right. Dr. Ronald Grazer, you are the U.S. Taxpayer Party candidate. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank all of the candidates for taking the time to join us for this Decision 2018 Candidate Forum. We asked the candidates questions on a number of issues. The extended interviews can be found at wgvu.org/politics. From all of us here at WGVU Public Media, please get out and vote.